Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1030 for November 12th, 2023. Coming up in a few minutes.
In the past, the blender was seldom seen. You know, they were really kept in the blending room and really didn't see the light of day. That is not the case now, and you know, and it's great that we're there to explain and talk about whiskey.
It's our 18th anniversary, and one of my favorite guests over the years has been Dewar's master blender, Stephanie Macleod. She became master blender in 2006, right after we started WhiskyCast, and she'll join me again on this anniversary episode for a chat. That's just ahead on WhiskyCast In-Depth, along with the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
And now, a Thanksgiving message from Robin Redbreast.
What am I thankful for? Being on the smaller end of the bird scale.
Happy Thanksgiving from Redbreast, proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
Greetings, everyone. It's Gabriel Cardarello with Dewar's, and I have big news. Dewar's is about to unveil the first chapter of a 4-part collector series dedicated to honoring the most famous whiskey-producing regions of Scotland. More on that in a bit.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. We don't often start off with a retirement announcement, but when it's the legend of Lagavulin, I'll make an exception. Ian MacArthur is stepping down as Lagavulin's lead warehouseman and tour guide on Tuesday after more than 50 years. There's a farewell party planned for December 8th at the distillery on Islay. And if you have a special memory of Ian from a tour or otherwise, the distillery team wants to hear from you. Email your stories about Ian to lagavulin@malts.com. Diageo shares ended the week down more than 12% after the number one drinks producer issued a profit warning for the first half of the fiscal year, largely because of pressure from Latin America. About 11% of Diageo's annual revenues come from Latin American countries, but the company says economic pressures in the region have led to a decline in consumption, along with downgrading to less expensive spirits. Diageo says its other 4 global regions are doing well, with increases expected in North America and Africa, while Europe and the Asia-Pacific region are showing slower growth. If British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Chancellor Jeremy Hunt want to achieve their goal of having the inflation rate by the end of the year, the Scotch Whisky Association and more than 400 UK businesses have a recommendation: cancel the planned excise duty hike on whiskey and other spirits in this month's budget address to Parliament. Government statisticians have concluded that the 10.1% increase imposed in August caused the largest inflation rise on record. Hunt is scheduled to deliver the autumn budget statement to Parliament on November 22nd. I reported last month that Scotland's newest distillery has started production, and now the team at Dunfale Distillery has filled its first casks. They filled 10 sherry butts with new make spirit on October 26th and set them aside to mature. The distillery's owners have started a new round of funding aimed at raising £2 million to support further production, expand sales and marketing capabilities, and develop the distillery's tours and visitor experiences. Another private equity firm is entering the whiskey business. MGD Acquisition has purchased a majority stake in California's Griffo Distilling for an undisclosed amount. Founders Michael and Jenny Griffo will remain with the distillery, which also produces gin, vodka, and liqueurs in addition to whiskey. New releases to mention this week. The Whiskey Exchange is out with its annual Christmas whiskey. It's a 15-year-old single malt from an undisclosed Speyside distillery that sells for £89.95 a bottle. Beam Suntory's Old Overholt Rye is releasing a 10-year-old cask strength edition from a single warehouse, Warehouse V at the Beam campus in Claremont, Kentucky. It'll be available in limited amounts for $99.99 a bottle. High West is releasing a new batch of The Prisoner's Share, created in collaboration with the Prisoner Wine Company. It's a blend of straight bourbon and rye whiskeys finished in Prisoner red wine barrels. Once again, it's a limited edition and carries a recommended retail price of $174.99 a bottle. 291 Colorado Whiskey is releasing 3 limited edition whiskeys, including batch 13 of its American single malt. The release also includes All Rye, a 100% rye malt made with 50% Colorado rye malt and 50% German rye malt, finished in aspen wood. There's also 12, the distillery's anniversary offering. It's a blend of 3-year-old rye barrels bottled at 67.3% ABV. And Ireland's Teeling Whiskey Company is out with a new 32-year-old Irish single malt, finished in casks from France's Rive Salts wine region. It's available through the distillery in Dublin and at the Teeling website for €2,950 a bottle. Finally, Springbank's 10-year-old and Wild Turkey Rare Breed took top honors in the online Scotch Whisky Awards the other day. Springbank also won Distiller of the Year, as well as Best Scotch Whisky of 2023, while Rare Breed won Best Non-Malt Whisky and Best World Whisky honors. Ardent American was named Best New Distillery of the Year, while Signatory Vintage won Independent Bottler of the Year honors, and the Aaron 10-year-old won the award for Best Value Single Malt. The awards are selected by a panel of whiskey reviewers who come up with nominations. Then those nominations are voted on by the general public. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Time to open up the calendar and look at upcoming whiskey events around the world. I'll be in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada this week for the New Brunswick Spirits Festival, which gets underway on Tuesday and runs through Saturday. This weekend also brings us the International Whiskey Festival in the Netherlands and Whiskey Live Singapore. The Kentucky Derby Museum has a special bourbon and bridals dinner and whiskey tasting honoring veterans on Wednesday night. Whiskey Fest Las Vegas is on December 2nd. The Fraser History Museum in Louisville has a holiday cheer bourbon and beer tasting event coming up on December 7th. And tickets are now on sale for the Victoria Whiskey Festival, January 18th through the 21st in Victoria, British Columbia. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendar at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
At Dewar's, we are gearing up to unveil a prestigious 4-part collector series of exceptionally high-end blended malts. The first gem in this collection, none other than the extraordinary Dewar's Double 37-year-old, a blended malt that is nothing short of remarkable. The Double 37-year-old undergoes Dewar's cutting-edge 4-stage aging process, meticulously designed to draw out the essence of whiskey barrels dating back to the late 80s. The result? An impeccable balance and a level of smoothness that is off the charts. To pay homage to the Speyside whiskey producing region, it gets an extra tip of the hat with a finishing process resting in Oloroso sherry casks that once cradled the prestigious Altmore single malt whiskey. As for the taste adventure, brace yourself for captivating notes that include the warmth of cinnamon, the velvety sweetness of heather honey, succulent juiciness of peaches, zesty pops of orange peel, and a decadent shower of brown sugar. And let me be clear, I'm merely giving you a glimpse of the sensational flavor adventure this whiskey has in store. This exceptional whiskey, though, is a rare find, so stay vigilant and find it at a store near you.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. Stephanie Macleod became the master blender for Dewar's and its various single malts in 2006, and over the years, she's won a shelf full of awards for her work. She's joined us many times here on WhiskyCast over the years, and we had another long conversation the other day about malts, her evolution as a blender over the years, and her role in bringing along other women in the whiskey industry for the next generation. Well, the first thing we need to talk about is this new 25-year-old Aberfeldy. Tell me what makes it unique.
This year is Aberfeldy's 125th anniversary. And so we really wanted to do something to mark the occasion. obviously we don't have anything that was laid down 125 years ago. Sadly, we don't. But we just thought 25-year-old was a nice number. And also it's my 25th year with Dewars. So that's not why they chose 25, but I like to tell that story anyway. So it's a big moment for me, 25 years, but more importantly, a big moment for the distillery, because 125 years of this rich history of Aberfeldy. So we had a look through our stocks of Aberfeldy and came across, a lovely example in Oloroso, and we all loved it. Sorry, excuse me a second. I've just got a dog that's chewing something. I don't know what it's chewing. Oh, it's all right. It's a bit of paper. That's fine. Sorry, panic over. And we just wanted something that not only that I had chosen, but also that our distillery manager, John Mackenzie, had a part in as well. Because sometimes we forget those that are responsible for actually making the spirit itself. And that's those that work at the distillery operators, and our wonderful distillery manager, John Mackenzie. And one of the special things about Scotch whisky and malt distilling is that often the jobs are passed down through generations. And often the people that are distilling our spirits never actually see it in a bottle, and yet they put everything that they have into it. And I think that's one of the special things about Scotch whisky, is that you don't know whether you're actually going to see the fruits of your labour actually in a bottle. And really, so we just wanted to celebrate all of these elements, the spirit itself, but also the legacy, and ensuring that our distillery manager, John Mackenzie, had a hand in choosing the spirit that we went ahead with.
What makes Aberfeldy Distillery unique?
Well, Aberfeldy geographically is in the heart of Scotland. So if you draw lines through the map of Scotland and, you look at the middle, Aberfeldy will be in the middle. And Aberfeldy is also the spiritual home of Dewars. So it was the only distillery to have been built by the Dewars family. And I do like to think, although I wasn't there at the time, although some days I feel as if I was there at the time, that A.J. Cameron, who was our first master blender, took inspiration for the Dewars white label from the character of Aberfeldy Distillery. Aberfeldy by nature is approachable, but also very complex, and the same can be said for Dewars, and that little wisp of smoke at the end as well. So there's an approachability, but the complexity, and so that's why Aberfeldy is so important to us as a company, John Dewar and Sons. But when you actually get to Aberfeldy, you've driven up from Glasgow, as I would do, and there's just this feeling of tranquility when I see the signs for Aberfeldy and step out of the car and into the actual distillery site, and you're always met with the guys have all got smiles on their faces, and it's a happy place to be. It's a happy whiskey. And as soon as you arrive, you get the aromas from the distillery itself, the actual whiskey making aromas. And then as you delve deeper into the distilleries, you get the specific aromas to the particular part of the process that you happen to be in at the time. And Scotch whiskey, Aberfeldy single malt is a product of the materials that it's made from, and three ingredients: water, malted barley, and yeast, which goes through the same processes that it's always gone through, milling, mashing, fermentation, distillation. So the same processes have occurred for 125 years. Different people carrying out those processes. But, and we always try to keep the new make spirit profile the same as we have always known it. So these are really important elements to us, and always to retain the honeyed smoothness, and we call it the golden dram, not only because of its smoothness, but also because of the alluvial gold in the surrounding hills of Aberfeldy. So there's so many special elements of Aberfeldy, and obviously, Aberfeldy isn't our only distillery. We've got 5 distilleries in total, but Aberfeldy is the one that has this real link to the history of Dewar's.
How has your blending style evolved over the 25 years you've been in the industry?
Well, I mean, I didn't start in the industry as a blender. I started, first of all, in the quality department. But I really wanted to be a blender, but I never actually thought that I would ever reach that height. I thought I would always be in a more technical role. But obviously my background at the University of Strathclyde was in the research of the sensory aspects of whiskey and how that related to the chemical structure of whiskey. So I really wanted to get into that side of it. And so when I was asked if I would like to train to be the master blender, which would have been in 2003, I jumped to the chance. But there was that element of fear, trepidation, that I was taking on this huge brand, and I felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders, that we have thousands of loyal whiskey drinkers across the world who do not want to see their dram changing. And so that's always been very important to me, to ensure that as we innovate, our single malts and our blends, that we're still remaining true to the character and the spirit of the Dewar's house style. But since taking on the role, as I did in 2006, I've always been keen to, as I said, maintain the style, but also to develop the style, and to constantly keep my ear to the ground as to what are our global whiskey drinkers telling us. And that's often informed by actually visiting the markets. And I remember very clearly visiting Shanghai for the first time, and we were taken on our trade tour to the various clubs and bars in the area. And I remember being utterly aghast that they were serving Dewar's 12 in a pitcher with lots of ice. And I thought, my goodness, imagine doing that. But then when I reflected on it, I thought, but that is how, in Shanghai, they enjoy drinking whiskey. And when tasked with a new product or creating a new blend or a new expression, I really do try to keep in mind who I'm blending for and what they want to get out of our whiskey. Will it be a cocktail? When we're, as you probably know, we do our exceptional cask range. And the exceptional cask range is a range of single casks and also finishes, and we've also done limited editions. And especially when you're creating a single cask, I always make sure that it is drinkable at cask strength, because I imagine that if someone is buying a whiskey at cask strength, they'll want to enjoy it at cask strength. So truly picturing and knowing what our whiskey drinkers, how they want to enjoy our brands is something that's really important. And with my team now of blenders, I always make sure that they keep that in mind as well, that it's not just about what we like, but it's most definitely about what our whiskey drinkers like. And also thinking ahead to the future, what will our whiskey drinkers of the future want? And so always being curious about what is possible within the realms of our Scotch whisky regulations, but also trying to think ahead to the future about how whisky could evolve.
But your style has evolved a little bit since then, hasn't it?
I'm not sure particularly my style has evolved. I think my learning of the blending process has evolved. And the processes that we use have evolved depending on the type of whiskey that we're making. When I started in 2006, the whole of our range was 40% alcohol, chill filtered, with the added colour. Now, most of our single malts, some of our blends are 46% and non-chill filtered with no colour added. So our approach and the level of sampling that we now have to do to ensure that all of our whiskies will be clear and bright at 46%, will look the same roughly as the previous batch, and will obviously have a consistent flavour. So in order to achieve that, we have to sample regularly in order to make sure that our whiskey drinkers are receiving the same experience with every batch, unless we decide to do something slightly different in the next batch. So the processes that we have to go through have most definitely evolved. And, also on the back of our exceptional cask range, the exceptional cask range, which applies to, our 4 distilleries, or mostly our 4 distilleries, so Aberfeldy, Altmore, Craigellachie and Royal Brackla. That gives us a chance to really experiment. So when we come across a parcel of casks that sound really interesting, we can get a sample of these casks, fill it with usually one of our single malts, but sometimes we'll put a blend in there as well, and just see how the character of the distillery complements or otherwise the character of the cask. And that's really how we started on our journey with wine casks, because I think the year after I started as master blender, we bought a number of wine casks, and we just played about with them and sampled them every year. And then eventually our brand teams also got excited at this concept. And then the exceptional cask range was born a few years ago. But that gives us the license to try out new things, and then if we're happy with them, then we will then offer them out to our various markets. And what we always do is when we get in a new batch of casks, we nose the casks, and sometimes before we even get the casks in, we might do a small trial with the spirits or the wine of the casks that we're getting, and then just do a really rudimentary, put some of the wine or the fortified wine or the spirit in a glass, rinse it out, and then put in the whiskey, and then just seeing at that stage, do they complement each other or do they clash? So these are all the steps that we've put in place to try as best we can to ensure success at the end of the process.
You've won a number of awards, both for yourself and for Dewar's. Do you think you get the credit you deserve?
I mean, awards and accolades are really the cherry on the top. People ask me, do I now make whiskies in order to achieve awards? And I don't. I make the whiskies that we believe our consumers want. And if we get an award for that along the way, then that's wonderful. And it's people like yourself, Mark, are giving us great reviews for the whiskey. And I know you don't give these reviews lightly. You put a lot of thought into them and a lot of care into what you're saying about them. And so when we get these reviews from people like yourself and the awards that we've been getting, it really truly does mean a lot to us. But in the past, the blender was seldom seen. They were really kept in the blending room and really didn't see the light of day. That is not the case now. And it's great that we're there to explain and talk about whiskey and to offer education on our brand as we see it from a technical point of view. So I think I get enough recognition. I'm definitely not complaining. And but as I say, the awards are something that we all feel great pride in, and not only for our generation that are currently making the whiskey, but for the past generations that have also touched this whiskey and have enabled us to be able to make these whiskies today. So all these small decisions that have been made over many, many years have now culminated in the whiskies that we are using today to make our blends. And hopefully in the future, the blenders will say that was great decisions that those people made back then, because we now have this terrific stock of really interesting whiskies that we can play with. And that is what the whiskey industry is all about.
You talk about future generations. Are you coaching up your successors?
Yes. So it's really exciting. You know, even from the very start in 2006, probably about a year later, I had someone in place who was the then assistant blender. Because you can't just, for many years, we just had one person that was responsible for everything. But you can't do that now. We've got not only do I have a team, but we also have a sensory panel as well. So we have a number of noses that are assessing the whiskey. So when a blend is created, it's assessed before it goes on to the bottling line. It's assessed, and there's safety in numbers, because there's always one person out there that is sensitive to a particular aroma, which we may not want to find in our whiskies, and so it's really important to have a number of people who are trained. But my specific team, so I'm very lucky. I've got 3 women at the moment that are all working on whiskey. So one of them, Rianne, she's actually on maternity leave at the moment. And Kirsty has taken up the role to learn about blending and to take up some of the tasks that Rianne has left behind. I've also got Anija Cherian. She came all the way over from India, left behind her family and her friends in order to pursue her dream of working in Scotch whisky. I also have Keith Geddes, who started with me in 2007. He then left 10 years later to pursue his dream of being a master blender in his own right, but then came back a couple of years ago to join us again. And so he is responsible for our inventory, as well as being a fully fledged blender, and also our wood buying, so there are casks as well. So I've got a really good team of experience, but also matched with the enthusiasm and the curiosity of youth as well. So, and also, I'm also trying to reflect our whiskey drinkers. Our whiskey drinkers aren't just based in the US or in the UK. It is very much a global industry. And so we need to try and reflect the global nature of Scotch whisky, and so Anija is giving her view, especially on tasting notes. I mean, the tasting notes that I generate are based on my experiences of flavour. But when you get someone coming from India, they can then bring in their experiences of Indian cuisine and aromas from that area. So that's really interesting as well, because often when I go to markets across the world, I will ask them to tell me what they get from our whiskies, and then use that information to inform my tasting notes, just to make them more global, rather than me talking about sweets that I would eat or candy when I was a child that nobody in Vietnam has any clue about. So it's to try and, make our whiskey completely accessible and understood by a global audience.
What do you want to be remembered for?
My aim has always been to leave our brands in a better condition than I found them. And it's not to say they were in a bad condition when I found them, but I just want to leave that legacy that I have left behind good quality, interesting whiskies and enough volume in order to achieve the things that John Dewar and Sons wants to achieve in the future. And also to bring those into the industry who perhaps thought that the whiskey industry wasn't for them. So when I joined the industry, there weren't many women in it, especially not in the technical side of the business. But now there is, and so I've always wanted to ensure that that we as a business and me personally are encouraging young women that the whiskey industry is for them. And, it's just wonderful to see that, whiskey dinners I used to go to where there was maybe only a handful of women went to them. There's now lots of women and lots of young women that are there, in all areas of the business. And, we've had, distillery managers that are women, we've got engineers that are women. And at Dewar's and Bacardi, we have a graduate program. And most of the graduates that we brought on were actually young women. And the reason that we chose them was because, all of the graduates were the best that we could find. And so it's not a tick box exercise. More and more women see the whiskey industry as a good place for them to work. And we want to see even more coming in. So that's what I'd really like to be remembered for, leaving behind great whiskies, but also that, in some way I've encouraged more women to join the industry.
Thanks to Stephanie Macleod for joining us on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. I was in Northern Ireland this week visiting distilleries as part of the annual Invest NI showcase, sponsored by Invest Northern Ireland. More on that next time around, and had the chance to taste a bunch of whiskeys. Let's start off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the new Hinch Distillery Madeira cask finish that was unveiled this week. It's made with sourced 5-year-old whiskey that was finished for an additional year in Madeira casks and bottled at 46% ABV. The nose has dark fruits, hazelnut, and a touch of brown sugar. The taste has a nice balance of hazelnut, plums, subtle spices, and raisins, while the finish is long, warm, and mouth-coating. I'm scoring the Hinch Madeira Cask Finish Irish Single Malt a 92. Titanic Distillers was the first distillery to open in Belfast since the end of Prohibition, when it started distilling earlier this year on the Thompson Dock. The debut blended whiskey from Titanic Distillers is bottled at 40% ABV, and the nose has a hint of campfire smoke and a vegetal character, along with pipe tobacco and a touch of toffee. The taste is sweet and chewy with a hint of campfire smoke, heather, honey, and vanilla. The finish? Long, smoky, and sweet. I'm scoring the Titanic Blended Irish Whiskey an 89. And finally, let's look at the Short Cross Rye and Malt Irish Whiskey from Radiman Estate Distillery. It's a 5-year-old whiskey distilled from both rye and malt and bottled at 46% ABV. The nose has touches of baking spices, dried fruits, and honey. The taste is thick and oily with a fruity and floral character and a delayed onset of allspice and cinnamon notes that last throughout the long finish. I'm scoring the Short Cross Rye and Malt Irish Whiskey a 91. I'll have more tasting notes for my trip to Northern Ireland next time around, and I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of nearly 3,600 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at WhiskyCast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever wondered where Redbreast got its name? Well, let's go back to 1912 and be glad our bird-watching founder didn't spot the bar-tailed godwit that day.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's open up the WhiskyCast community app and see what people are talking about this week. Our community segment is brought to you by Waterford Whiskey. After I posted word of Ian MacArthur's retirement this Tuesday in the app, several people chimed in with their memories of touring the Lagavulin warehouses with him. Rick at the Whiskey Zone said, quote, "It's been an Isla rite of passage for years now, wishing him all the best in his retirement." Suzanne Drams added this, "When we visited in 2017, he said he would be retiring the week after. That was a long week. I really enjoyed his tastings. We didn't do a tour with him, but got to enjoy some really special whiskeys." HRC posted this, "Had the privilege to talk with and enjoy Drams with Ian on a warehouse tour with the Tracer Bullet in 2018. Great experience." And the Tracer Bullet added in, "I've had the pleasure of meeting Ian twice during 2 warehouse tours in 2017 and 2018. He made that tour. Whoever takes that over will have quite the shoes to fill. Thanks, Ian." And as for me, I first met Ian during the Fay-Gilles trip to Isla in May of 2010 during a warehouse tour. Small in stature, but a giant in heart, Ian is one of those characters that makes whiskey so much fun to talk about. I could listen to him tell stories for hours. Enjoy your retirement, Ian. If you'd like to join the conversation, download the free WhiskyCast community app from the Apple or Google App Stores and jump right in. You can also find us on Instagram, Threads, X, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and my email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is brought to you by Waterford Whiskey.
Trevor Harris, Alan Ross and Amy Jackson, Pat and Dennis Booth, Alan Mooney, John MacDonald. Just a few of the growers who helped to make us the biggest distillers of organic whiskey in the world. Waterford Whiskey, the most naturally flavoursome single malt.
Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. And this week it's a personal history. 18 years ago today, I produced the very first episode of WhiskyCast using a mini-disc recorder and a Sony laptop computer. It was the start of my whiskey journey. Yes, WhiskyCast is old enough now to have an age statement. As one of the people on our press trip this week in Northern Ireland pointed out, she couldn't remember a time when there wasn't a WhiskyCast. I started producing WhiskyCast as a way to explore and learn more about whiskey myself, and figured there might be some people who shared a similar interest. I never knew I'd be exploring and learning more about whiskey each week 18 years ago, and it's led to friendships I never would have had otherwise, as well as travel to places I never thought I'd get to visit. I've been blessed to share this journey with you, and don't worry, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. There is still a lot more to learn. That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the new WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from the Apple and Google App Stores. Our email address, comments@whiskycast.com.
Dewar's Double 37-year-old blended malt whiskey is a true collector's treasure, a rarity worth hunting for and cherishing, perhaps sharing with the lucky few. Please drink responsibly. Copyright 2023, Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 48% alcohol by volume.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever go out drinking with a peacock? Always the same. Few too many, tail feathers come out, drinks get knocked over, bartender's not happy, night's over before it started. All I'm saying is, don't be the peacock in your group.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2023. and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.